This podcast contains adult language and stories of true crime. If you don't like laughing, crying, or being horrified at the actions of other humans, this podcast is not for you.
Everyone, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 19 of Resolved Mysteries.
Hello!
Hello.
Look at me providing you space to say hello.
I usually provide the space, and then I wait, and nothing happens, so then I start talking, and then you say hello.
Yeah, that's usually what we do.
Every time.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is the show where we rewatch, recap, and give you the latest updates to cases featured on the show Unsolved Mysteries. I'm Carlin.
I'm Alison.
I'm Eliza.
And
this is our
here
show.
we are.
Okay, everyone. This is the last time we're going to tell you. We did it the last few weeks. You noticed that we split up episode 18 into 2 parts and that you got one part on one Monday and one part on another Monday, and that's what we're doing now for the most part. So
we didn't mess up.
Yeah, we are recording this fully before both parts of episode 18 came out, so anything could have happened between now and when your ears are hearing this, but we are sending good vibes into the universe that everything went fine with this new weekly format. And again, we will not say it to you again.
Do not ask us again.
Do not ask us, and we will not say it.
We're done talking about this.
I mean, it's been 2 weeks.
It's now been 3 weeks, okay? And that's it.
3 weeks, 3 episodes. You guys get it.
So this is going to be part 1 of episode 19, right? Mm-hmm. And next week, you're going to get part 2, okay?
Look at that. Look at that.
And this is it.
How many episodes is this season?
Ooh, that's funny because I put it in the outro, but there's only 22, which means we're almost done.
That's wild, y'all. Can anyone
Pretty
even
wild.
believe we've made it this far?
I personally can't. No.
Neither can I.
I cannot. But look at us. It's pretty rad.
Still trucking.
Still trucking.
All right. So for every review we receive, we donate $1 to a different organization. And this month's organization is Angels with Misplaced Wings. And this was suggested to us by Courtney G., our patron. And she wrote, Angels with Misplaced Wings is run by a lovely couple in Vancouver, Washington that rescues special needs and hospice dogs.
Okay.
They do everything themselves and just registered as a nonprofit a few years ago, so their online presence is totally DIY. The best place to learn about them is through their Facebook page, and then she provided a link, which we will obviously give you. So thank you so much, Courtney. That is a beautiful suggestion.
I know.
And close to us.
I love the local ones, too.
Yeah. So if you'd like to support us on Patreon, you'll get access to ad-free episodes, 2 additional episodes a month, early access to listener short stacks, and things in the mail. What more could you ask, honestly? Go to www.patreon.com/resolvedmysteriespodcast.
So really quickly, we've heard from you guys recently that the sound hasn't been super great the last few episodes. I edit this podcast. I produce it. I'm working on it. Thank you for your patience. We switched our host provider recently, and we're just trying to figure out their ad volume versus our episode volume. So we're on it. And part of being on it is that we reached out to a professional, a woman named Ruby Skilton. And she's a podcast producer, an audio expert, and she's the host of a podcast called Flaunt Your Flaws. She's the kindest, most incredible woman. She worked with me for a few hours, taught me things that I should have learned about 3 years ago, but her podcast is pretty amazing. This is how she describes it. Quote, I was born with a physical difference, but we all struggle with some type of insecurity, physical or emotional. So each episode, I hope, will bring you some clarity on how effing beautiful you are. And just because you embrace your story doesn't mean you're not trying to improve yourself daily. So check out her podcast, and we just want to give like a big heartfelt thanks to Ruby for her help and guidance with the sound engineering of this podcast. She's awesome. So thank you, Ruby.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruby. Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
All right. What is everyone covering in this episode?
I am covering a mysterious legend that I, when assigning these cases, thought was a total throwaway, but of course wasn't, as typical. So it is the story of the Butcher of Kingsbury Run.
I was at your house the other day.
Right.
Picking something up. And by something, I mean my child. And you were reading a little book about that.
I was.
Case, I believe.
I was. I love when I find a good read about a topic.
Oh, yeah. Okay, and I've got a final appeal segment, and it's the story of Patricia Stallings and her son, Ryan Stallings.
Okay, and then we've got an unexplained death, and it's a local case about Michael Franke.
And then I wrap it up with a missing persons case, and it is the story of Oded Gordon.
All right.
All right.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. So this is a Mysterious Legends segment. It's kind of fun. It's old-timey, so we don't have to be sad about anything. I mean, it's sad and weird and gross, but, like, it's not current, so that's good. Shoo. Also, it's a little fun because not only is it about the Butcher of Kingsbury Run, who is also known as the Cleveland Torso Murder.
Oh.
Boop. There. I knew you would recognize it once I said the other name. It is also about Eliot Ness.
Yeah, all the things.
All the things. All the things. So the segment opens with black and white aerial views of old-timey Chicago. Stack says, in Chicago of 1929, prohibition was the law of the land. With alcohol illegal, speakeasies sprung up on every street corner and alleyway. Bootlegging and police corruption were rampant. An aggressive 26-year-old Treasury agent was hired to smash the gangland rackets that gripped the city. His name, Eliot Ness. Stack says that after crushing Capone in Chicago, Eliot Ness became one of the most respected lawmen in the country. If you want to learn a bit more about Al Capone, Eliza discussed him in Season 1, Episode 17's Alcatraz episode.
Yep, I sure did. And I remember every word I said.
I knew that you weren't going to remember that at all. So, Stack then just casually throws in, quote, "When I played Ness on television, I learned, like many well-known figures, there was a secret private side to his public persona."
Just a casual.
Spill that tea. Spill that tea, Stack. So I'm sure, as many of you know, Robert Stack played Eliot Ness in the ABC TV television series The Untouchables from 1959 to 1963, for which he won the 1960 Emmy for Outstanding Performance by an Actor in a Series.
Good job, Stacky.
I still never watched it. I need to.
So the show portrayed the ongoing battle between gangsters and a special squad of federal agents in Prohibition-era Chicago. And I'm going to give a little bit more information about that at the end, just because it's fun. So anyway, Stack goes on to say that those who knew Ness knew that he had a fearless determination to wipe out corruption, but he was also a man who was not above bending the law himself to bring criminals to justice. We now know that police officers are not supposed to do that, but back then it was cute. After the Untouchables, Ness went on to encounter the one case he could not crack, a case which would haunt him for the rest of his life. That's not totally true.
Drama.
September 1934, Eliot Ness came to Cleveland, Ohio as a public safety director, a position comparable to a modern-day police commissioner. When Ness arrived, Cleveland was a known safe haven for gangsters and street criminals. Over the next years, arrests went up and crime went down. But there was another evil afoot in the city, which would soon overshadow Ness's primary mandate. In September of 1935, the mutilated bodies of two men were found in Kingsbury Run, a, quote, slum district. I'm just going to give a warning here.
Yeah.
I'm directly quoting. Mm-hmm. It's completely not appropriate, the language that's used, but I'm quoting it.
Yeah.
I'm going to do my best to be correct and I don't want to mess this up, but so It's, quote, a slum district swarming with hobos, prostitutes, and street toughs.
Okay, all the words we wouldn't say.
Exactly. So Kingsbury Run is physically a prehistoric riverbed running from the flats to about East 90th Street in Cleveland. The train and rapid transit tracks still run through Kingsbury Run. It's bordered on the north by Woodland Avenue and on the south by Broadway Avenue. Kingsbury Run was a dark, dreary, and dangerous place in the 1930s. The dispossessed of the Great Depression lived in appalling conditions. Trash and filth dominated the makeshift, quote, hobo jungle that occupied much of the run. These people, most of them transients, often rode the rails to escape the brutal Cleveland winters or simply to keep moving. So at the time the bodies were discovered, the case was dismissed as a vicious but routine double homicide. By the summer of 1936, 3 more bodies had been found. That fall, a 6th victim was discovered. Stephen Nichol, an author, says that when the 6th victim was discovered, it was like a bombshell going off. He said the city really exploded. The press and the public now had no doubts that there was a serial killer out there and that this person was going to keep killing. Eventually, this killer would murder 12 men and women, and as many as 18 other murders in the Cleveland area were also thought to be connected to this case.
Damn.
Like many serial killers, the most vulnerable people in society were targeted, the poor and desperate. Only 2 of the victims were ever positively identified. One was Edward Andersey, who is very dapper and very cute. He does not look like he's living hard. He's a cutie. Andersey had an arrest record. He was rumored to be gay, and he frequented the Roaring Third area, which was an area east of Kingsbury Run. So a lot of these murders happened around the Roaring Third, and a lot of the victims hung out there. The Roaring Third was home to bars, brothels, flop houses, and gambling dens. Andersey's body was discovered naked except for a pair of socks. It was cleaned and drained of blood. There were rope burns around both wrists, and the coroner determined that the cause of death had been decapitation.
Ugh.
Oh, my God.
The only other victim identified was Florence Polillo, a waitress, barmaid, and sex worker. Both were identified only because their fingerprints were on record, because their heads were not on their bodies. All of the victims so far had been decapitated, in most cases while they were still alive.
No.
Yeah. 5 were found floating in the water. Their blood had been completely drained from their bodies. The reporters dubbed the murderer the Butcher of Kingsbury Run, but now he is more frequently known as the Cleveland Torso Murderer. Nichol says that Ness got into the case quite extensively. He devoted almost full time to it. Nichol doesn't say that it took Ness a while to do that. Nichol also says that Ness didn't really know how to work the case. A serial killer is very different from hunting mobsters and closing down speakeasies. This was a different type of criminal that Eliot Ness was facing. Oscar Fraley, another author, said that Eliot had made a profile of who he thought the killer might be from how the bodies were dissected. Ness had a theory that the killer had some sort of medical knowledge. Plus, the person must have had considerable strength to carry the bodies and dump them. Stack says that Ness had reached an impasse. He wasn't allowed legally to search the dwellings of Kingsbury Run because he had no legal grounds to get search warrants. So he skirted the need for warrants by pairing detectives with fire officials and ordering widespread safety inspections.
Oh, so sneaky, so smart.
Little sneaky, right? Nichol says that Ness and the police thought that they would find a sort of a laboratory, and he says, quote, with blood spattered on the walls and body parts just lying around.
No such luck.
Oh my gosh, Nichol is pretty cavalier. I like it. He says that Ness's men spent a week searching every place, every apartment, and every dwelling, but they couldn't find anything. Stack says that Ness next pinpointed every doctor and hospital worker in Cleveland, even the county coroner. Hundreds of people were put under surveillance, questioned, and detained. The investigation still led nowhere, and the killer remained at large. The case began to consume Eliot Ness. This narrative isn't exactly correct, and I'm really interested why it's even happening.
Oh my God, why do they do this?
The story of the Cleveland Torso murder and the story of Eliot Ness are both independently interesting enough, weave this tale of like obsession, and it didn't fly like this, and it's like kind of a bummer because the stories are interesting enough on their own without the scandal and the salaciousness. So in August of 1938, victims 11 and 12 were found. The 12th victim was scattered in a rubbish heap just 200 yards from Eliot's office. Nichols says it was clear, based on the location of the last two bodies, that the killer was becoming more daring. It was a cat-and-mouse game, like Catch Me If You Can. Mm-hmm. Fraley says that Cleveland officials were now bragging that it was one of the safest cities in the United States, quote, except for the killer, who was still chopping off heads and cutting up bodies.
Yeah. Except for that little part.
Safest.
The two authors that are interviewed in this have so much personality. Fraley says that Ness knew he had to do something desperate because the people in the city were frightened and, quote, losing their minds.
Uh-oh. Well.
Oh, quite literally.
I love it. I love it. He's like, there was no hyperbole. Stack says that the storm of public criticism drove Ness to take drastic measures. Less than 48 hours after the discovery of victims 11 and 12, the police descended upon Kingsbury Run's, quote, hobo jungles. So I've learned a lot about the area after I did my research, but while I was watching this segment, I'm like, what are they talking about? They're using such floral language. Just say what it looked like.
Yeah.
At that point, I was imagining sort of the homeless encampments that we see, but I still wasn't sure. It turns out that they were essentially Hoovervilles made of tarp and canvas, but there were some wooden structures and there was some tenement housing, and then there were quote-unquote flop houses where you basically get a small cubby that you live in. So Stack says that law enforcement rounded up over 60 transients, hoping that the killer would be among them. Nichols says that this was Ness's old Untouchables style of a raid. So the Untouchables were the group of police officers that Ness worked with to take down Capone in Chicago. And he said that Ness thought it really might work. At the very least, Ness thought that he could remove some of the people that the killer was preying on. Obviously completely backfired on him, because he set fire to homes of people that don't have any money or anywhere to go. So there was a great wave of public opinion that this was the act of a desperate man and that his tactics had been brutal and that they didn't solve anything. So not surprisingly, of those arrested that night, none turned out to be the killer. Weirdly, after the shantytowns were destroyed, the murders in Cleveland mysteriously stopped. But Stack says the case was not over for Eliot Ness. He remained bitter and dissatisfied. He didn't. According to experts, he was frustrated because he believed he knew so this is true. According to experts, he was frustrated because he believed he knew the identity of the killer, but he could never come up with enough evidence to make an arrest. Ness's suspect belonged to a prominent Cleveland family, and in 1938, the man had himself committed to a state mental institution. Author Fraley says that after this mystery man had himself committed to a mental health facility, the killing stopped. Fraley says that Ness said that the man fit the profile. Fraley goes on to say that if Ness would have accused this man, who came from a socially prominent family, that he could have been sued for libel, and Ness wouldn't be willing to do that because he believed in covering the letter of the law. I guess, except for when Stack said that he didn't really believe that. I mean, it's kind of contradictory.
What is the narrative to believe here?
It is a mess. And again, the story is just interesting as a standalone. Stack says that incredibly, 10 years later, Eliot Ness received a number of postcards from a patient at a mental health facility taunting him with references to the murders. The segment continues. Eliot Ness never fully recovered from his disappointment in being unable to close the case. He resigned as public safety director in 1942. 5 years later, he ran for mayor of Cleveland. When questioned about the torso slayings during the campaign, Ness enigmatically replied, "That case has been solved."
Ooh.
Eliot Ness lost the election by a landslide and left Cleveland.
Oof.
He never returned to law enforcement. Okay, so I read a book about this. There was a book released in August of this past year called Eliot Ness and the Mad Butcher, Hunting America's Deadliest Unsolved Serial Killer at the Dawn of Modern Criminology. It is written by Max Allen Collins and Brad Schwartz, and it is a great book. It's everything you want to know about this.
Nice.
So all of the information I'm going to share with you comes from the book. So Eliot Ness had two heroes. The first was his brother-in-law, who was a Scottish immigrant who worked in the first stages of the FBI. And the second hero was Sherlock Holmes. Ness loved a, quote, locked room mystery and trained his body and mind in the way that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's character did, becoming proficient in jujitsu and marksmanship. We mostly know about Ness through his Untouchables initiative. He was tapped to come to Cleveland because of his dedication to the law. In Cleveland, they gave him the Untouchables 2.0, and those people were known as the Unknowables.
Oh.
So essentially, he gets to Cleveland, he picks people he can trust, they become the Unknowables. Nobody knows who these policemen are, and they start weeding out the corruption in Cleveland. So in 1934, Ness comes to Cleveland. Cleveland was a bit of a hot mess. In the 1920s, it was the place to be. The city rose to a level of prosperity that it would never see again. Post-Depression and Prohibition, the city was not doing well. Ness initially attacked the stills and the crime bosses with the same intensity he used for the Chicago outfit. So by October 1934, Ness and his team had shut down 762 liquor stills, cutting Cleveland's bootlegging liquor supply in half.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So Ness is doing his thing. He's crushing bootlegging, he's crushing organized crime, cleaning up the city. But then a weird thing happens in August of 1934. Pieces of a woman's body begin to surface on the shore of Lake Erie on Euclid Beach in Cleveland's notorious East Side. A woman's ribs and then her backbone appeared on the shore's edge. Her spine had been sliced with a butcher knife and her legs were severed with surgical precision. It would later be determined that she had died in March of 1934. Someone with a fair amount of anatomical knowledge had expertly separated her spine and unhooked her knees.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
A chemical preservative had been applied to her body, reddening and toughening the skin.
Oh God.
September 23rd, 1935, two boys are hanging around Jackass Hill.
Okay.
It's like, go high. Don't call it Jackass Hill. Call it like Royal Hill or something. Like, just, you know.
Maybe that's like where they sent the jackasses. They're like, you know what? Go to the fucking hill. And you had to go sit and think about yourself.
You're being a real dick and or you're a donkey. Get thee to Jackass Hill.
Either way.
So they're hanging around Jackass Hill and they discover a body. Police determined that it was a body of a man in his mid-20s. His head had been cut off and his genitals were dissected. While the police were searching for the head of this body,
Oh no.
they discovered another body 30 feet away, also naked,
Too many
decapitated, and with the genitals eviscerated. The body had been dead for several weeks, and like the woman found in Lake Erie, the body had been treated with some sort of chemical. So here I have to mention that so far, all of these people had died of decapitation. I cannot express how rare that is.
No.
When we see this, the victims are usually dead before they are decapitated. Right. If nothing else, logistically, the amount of blood, the arterial spray, the general messiness says a lot about who this person was and how they were able to operate like this. Ugh. So one of the two victims discovered, like we saw in the segment, was my boyfriend, Edward Andersey.
I'm so sorry for your loss.
Oh my God. I'm still heartbroken about it like 100 years later. So as Zach mentions in the segment, he's one of only two solid identifications out of the 12 to 13 victims. Andersey was a complicated man, just my type. So it seems that there were a lot of motives for murder. He was also an off-and-on employee at a mental health facility in Cleveland City Hospital. Andersey had a reputation in the Roaring Third Precinct as a drunken brawler who sold pornography, marijuana, and women.
Oh, no. Okay.
You had me at pornography.
Yeah,
you lost me at women. Shortly before Andersey's death, the jilted husband had sworn to, quote, get him for playing around with my wife. Others spoke of same-sex liaisons. Evidence suggested that Andersey made money as a procurer of young men. And then he had told relatives that a gang of Italians was seeking revenge on him because he stabbed one of theirs in a fight. So there were a lot of people that wanted to kill poor Edward. Then, in January 1936, another body turns up in the Roaring Third. She is the second person to ever be officially identified, like we saw in the segment. Her name was Florence Polillo. She was a sex worker, but according to her landlady, she was friendly when she wasn't drinking.
Oh.
And kind of creepily, she collected dolls.
Okay.
Okay.
What can we say?
But she was a kind woman, and the landlady said that she would allow her children to, the landlady's children, to play with the dolls.
Oh, that makes it a little less creepy.
Yeah.
They're serving a purpose.
Dolls are inherently creepy, but yes. Like the other victims, she had died by decapitation, and like the 1934 Lady of the Lake, she was completely bisected and left where she would be easily discovered. So now, let's just take a second. Who do you know that was bisected?
Black Dahlia.
Black Dahlia, baby.
Right. So there's a whole spiderweb of theories about this being connected to the Black Dahlia.
Yeah.
We don't have that kind of time. So even with the similarities, for some reason, the police refused to consider that the deaths were all linked together.
Oh, my God.
Oh my God.
Oh,
What?
my God.
They're like, no, it's just a head fest, okay? Heads everywhere.
No big deal.
Honestly, that's so weird.
It's a bunch of different people.
Yeah, that makes it worse. That makes
I
it
know.
so much worse.
Wouldn't you rather it's one person that killed 12 people instead of 12 people decapitating 12 people?
And they're all done with medical precision. Like, it's so strange.
Yeah. So, you might be wondering what Eliot Ness is doing right now. If you're thinking that Ness got to Cleveland and then the torso killer showed up and Ness was like, oh my God, this is super important, let's get him. That's not what happened.
Oh, Stacky. Come on.
Ness did not come to Cleveland to mess around with a serial killer. He came to work on the important things in the city, like traffic safety.
Oh, good. Hey, he's got a job to do.
I mean, he's got a job to do, and that's how he was for the early part of this, or I'd say up until like the 6th or 7th victim. He was like, this isn't my job. I'm basically the police commissioner. I'm here to make the city safer for the population, not for these poor people living under bridges.
Okay.
That's not my problem.
Okay.
Cars had recently come to Cleveland, and the only thing worse than a serial killer is a population that consists of some people driving cars while other people don't know what cars are. It's a recipe for disaster. People are truly just walking in front of cars.
Oh, no.
I mean, when you think about it, when you go to London, you just walk right in front of those cars because you don't remember which way to look.
Exactly.
Oh,
so it's that, but it's everyone everywhere.
But it's every direction because their brain is literally not trained to do it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
So Ness invented look both ways before crossing the street.
Um,
All of the traffic, like safety stuff that you're taught as a kid basically came from Eliot Ness and his Cleveland initiative.
Wow, king of safety.
He is truly the king of safety, and he was doing a lot of good work. So for to spin this like he never recovered, Ness was like, I'm good. I did a pretty good freaking job over there, so eat my butt.
King of safety except for murder safety.
Except for the serial killer. It's like a schmidge.
If it's bloody, though, I don't want to get near it.
Ness is dealing with corruption cases, and now these automobiles, this traffic safety stuff, and also a torso killer. But it gets worse because there are also children gangs.
What?
Gangs
My
of children.
gosh, little rascals.
Like the Newsies?
Sort of, but meaner and with more knives.
And less songs, probably.
I mean, they could, they probably did a little ditty, a little limerick.
Less papes.
If you give them enough alcohol, I'm sure they sing.
Right?
So basically, it's a rough time to be a teenage boy in Cleveland in the post-Depression era.
My
You're
God.
starving. There are no job prospects for you. You probably have 13 siblings. Your mother's probably exhausted. Your father's probably drunk.
You're expected to bring home money somehow.
Yeah. So what are you going to do? You're going to steal. Right? So there are these roving gangs of teenage and adolescent boys.
Honestly,
Cleveland sounds like a nightmare.
that's my nightmare. That's my nightmare.
God.
I'm terrified of teenagers. They terrify me. So Eliot Ness, basically rolls into these impoverished neighborhoods, and he gets together the leaders of each of the teenage gangs. And he says to them, okay, be cool. If I get you guys a job, will you not make fun of the younger kids for wanting to maybe be in the Boy Scouts or join a sports club? Because basically, there was a lot of outreach to these kids, and the little boys would be like, yeah, I want to be a Boy Scout. And then the older kids who were dead inside because their lives were terrible would beat the crap out of these little kids, steal their uniforms, make fun of them.
Wow.
And then the little kids would just eventually join this gang.
Right.
It was hopeless in the truest sense of the word. There was no hope.
God.
So, Ness is like, if I get you hooked up with a job, give you a purpose, will you guys stop being dicks, basically? This is what happens when I give a book report.
I love it.
So the teenage boys are like, nobody's going to hire us. We have records. People think we're thieves. They think we're poor, So then Ness goes to the business owners and he says, listen, would you rather give these boys a chance or would you rather have them continuously rob you and beat you up?
That is so nice.
So then the business owners say, okay, let's send them my way. I'll give them a chance. Ness basically destroys youth crime. Well, I should say white youth crime in Cleveland for about a decade by this initiative. So he's doing really good work for Cleveland. Yeah. He's cleaning house, bringing in new recruits. He's got that traffic safety thing. He's removing corruption. He's helping children.
He's like, guys, I got an idea. Stop signs.
So things are going well for Ness beside the butcher. And then in July of 1936, another body turns up.
Oh, no.
This time, no head is found. There's no way to identify the body. So in September of 1936, Ness announced that he's going to take over the torso case. So it's been 2 years. These bodies have been popping up. But like I said, Ness is the police commissioner. He's not a detective. He's not working homicide. So he's like, this isn't my thing.
So was it just sheer amount of time that he was finally like, okay, fine, I'll do something about it?
I'll circle back to it, but it was the sort of a confluence of events. Essentially, he's on the record telling a newspaper, he's like, the people I serve in this community, the wealthy elite, essentially, they're not being victimized. Yeah. So I don't.
Yep.
And he's like, so they don't care.
Yep.
So,
oh my God.
Yep. So, and I was going to talk about it later, but we can talk about it now. But so essentially all of these rich people in Cleveland are like clutching their pearls and howling. But it's like a morbid sense of curiosity because they know that their lives are not in threat. There's nothing. They're not in peril. They're fine.
Yeah.
But they're not fine from getting hit by a car or being the victim of teenage violence.
Right.
So for 2 years, they were telling Ness to keep his eye on the prize and focused on what he was brought there for. And then eventually it was, of course, the press that was like, why does nobody really care about this? So in September of 1936, Ness puts Detective Peter Murillo on the case and allows Murillo to choose his partner. Murillo's a badass. He's been fully vetted by Ness, and Ness didn't mess around on that end. So he is brought into the fold of the Unknowables, and Peter Murillo selects another unflappable officer to work alongside him, a man named Martin Zelwiski. So it's pretty interesting that Ness chose Murillo to take the lead on this case, and it really speaks to Ness's leadership because they were super different, and Murillo was this old school detective who followed his gut, and he thought that Ness was a little bitch. He thought Ness was some college boy who only knew classroom law and didn't have any street experience. And they didn't really like each other, but I thought it was interesting that Ness recognized that having someone like Murillo on the case was important.
Yeah.
So at this point, it's fall of 1936, and everyone is trying to profile this killer, like Stack mentioned in the segment. The butcher displayed an ability to hunt, kill, and dispose of evidence without being seen. Even Jack the Ripper left behind eyewitnesses, enough to get a rough description. Yeah. The butcher remained faceless and formless, a nameless phantom shrouded in the shadows of Kingsbury Run. They wrote this profile, and it's one of the earliest profiles ever created of a serial killer. It was probably the second one, only since Jack the Ripper in 1888.
Wow.
Like the segment said, the butcher, experts agreed, must be a man and must be big and strong, capable of carrying a headless corpse down a steep hill and then climbing back up and grabbing another corpse. Because he's dumping multiple bodies at a time.
I hate the entire sentence you just said.
I say a lot of really gross sentences in this segment. I hate it too. The killer knew Kingsbury Run really well, too, likely living near where he left his victims. Although the dismemberment showed considerable knowledge of anatomy, they argued against a trained surgeon suspecting either a hunter or a butcher. As most victims had not been killed where they were found, they felt that the butcher worked in some sort of facility or laboratory near the run. Oh. They also believed that he befriended his victims for weeks or even months before using a large, heavy knife on them. While the profilers agreed that the butcher was, quote, crazed and, quote, a pervert, they couldn't label him with any known form of insanity at the time. The butcher, they theorized, led a normal life when not pursuing his gruesome hobby. Only decades later would criminologists recognize the ability of some serial killers to hide their true natures behind charming masks and just live a normal life. Yep. So eventually a man named David Cowles gets involved in the case. He's a ballistics expert, and he used the profile that the team created to flag a suspect. He found a man who was actually looked at for Edward Andersey's murder specifically. The suspect had been a doctor but was suffering from alcoholism. He had spent most of his life in Kingsbury Run, but the doctor claimed that he had an alibi as a patient in a veterans hospital when some of the murders were committed, so David Cowles had to put the suspect aside and pursue other leads. So, February 23rd, 1937, a man searching for driftwood discovers a woman's torso severed at the waist, her arms and head missing, and she's discovered practically in the exact same spot where the lady of the lake had washed up 2.5 years earlier. This woman had not died from decapitation, and investigators couldn't figure out what had killed her or how her body wound up in the lake or what her name was. They just concluded that she was a woman and had probably been a mother, but nobody came forward to claim her. They found her lower torso 3 months later, but there was no evidence on the body. So, June 6th, 1937, 14-year-old Russell Lauer discovered a skull with gold teeth. He was basically like scavenging and calls the police. The police come and search, and they find a collection of bones, skeletal remains of a torso without limbs, and a foot-long chunk of decaying flesh. Additionally, at the scene, they find 2 pieces of women's clothing, a tasseled woolen cap, and a sleeve from a dress. Detectives also find, quote, a tangled mess of black hair. It was assumed at the time that it was a wig. So, they also found a clue beside the gold teeth work. In the bag of bones was a scrap of paper. It was a theater review. Police were able to piece together that the review had run in the Plain Dealer newspaper on June 5th, 1936, the same day that another body was discovered. So, the coroner, a man named Gerber, estimated that the woman's bones had been there for about a year, and theorized that the two were murdered around the same time, but the woman wasn't discovered. The examination determined that the woman was a black woman, 5 foot, 100 pounds, and 30 to 40 years old. What they thought was a wig at the crime scene was actually her scalp. And there were knife marks similar to the butcher's other victims.
Stop it, Alison. Yeah. Stop.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I'm laughing. I'm just... It's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? This is so disgusting and horrifying.
It's really horrible.
Okay.
Please know that we're not laughing at victims. We are uncomfortable.
Oh my God. I'm just laughing because I'm so uncomfortable. Yeah. This is so
and
disgusting.
We can't believe that it's our job to say sentences.
And I'm tracing the decisions I've made
this.
throughout my life that has brought me here now. Later that month, the woman's dental work was traced back to a dentist in Cincinnati who had done similar bridge work for a woman named Rose Wallace.
Wow, I'm surprised they could trace something like that.
Do you know who discovered that? Detective Murillo.
Wow.
He is amazing. Time and time again in the book I read, he never turned down a lead. He traveled to California at some point.
Wow.
Because they got a hoax letter, and he went out to California and investigated a bunch of murders out in California. I mean, he was amazing.
Heck yeah, he did. He's looking at every angle.
Relentless. I mean, just incredible, incredible police work. So he confirmed that Rose Wallace was a black woman matching the physical description of the skeleton that was discovered. Wallace was an occasional sex worker and had a connection to the other known female victim, Florence Polillo. They moved in the same circles. They hung out at the same bar where Polillo was last seen alive. And witnesses say that Wallace was at the same bar the night she disappeared.
Okay.
However, Murillo was never able to confirm for sure that the remains belonged to Wallace because the dentist who performed the work had died 15 years before. They gave Wallace's son a description of the skeleton. I mean, I don't know. But, that made Wallace's son believe that it was her. But
I wonder what.
They're describing a skeleton, so they're going to say, oh, it's a black woman, 5 foot. And he's going to say, that's my mom.
Yeah.
The bridge work is, it's pretty memorable. It's pretty specific.
Maybe height, too. They can...
Yeah, true.
I was thinking, like, the dress sleeve. I don't know how close they were, but maybe he recognized the dress sleeve.
Yeah. It's just so unusual to have a killer who kills different races and different genders.
Yes.
That's why, too, there's a lot of people that say that this woman wasn't a victim because serial killers don't kill outside of race, but then we know that serial killers do kill outside of race.
Of course.
There's an exception for everything.
Yeah.
They can barely write a profile today. Imagine what it was like in 1937.
Right.
Gosh.
Most importantly about this discovery was that the coroner, Gerber, he disagreed. He said the body that he found was murdered in June, which was 3 months before Wallace disappeared. I think that if the bridge work matched and the description matched, it's probably likely that it was Rose Wallace. So on July 6th, 1937, a man's torso was discovered in the Cuyahoga River. Is it Cuyahoga? Cuyahoga River. I knew I was going to get that wrong. The torso was cut in half like the other butcher victims. More pieces turned up in the river that day and throughout the week. The upper half of a torso was wrapped in burlap. Arms and legs were discovered, separated at the joint, but no head was ever found.
Where are all the heads? Ugh.
The coroner also noted that this victim was killed with a new level of brutality. The butcher had chopped off the head with considerably more hacking than seen on previous torsos. Ooh. The torso was also disemboweled, and he had removed the viscera and the heart.
Where is the blood going?
Yes. Right? Excellent question. I might have an answer.
Also, the heads. Where are the heads?
Girl, I don't know. I just work here. Meanwhile, traffic deaths are down considerably.
Great job.
Thank God. I'm so glad.
And
Killing it.
Ness is bringing corrupt officials to trial. He's also beginning to get involved in labor disputes and unions. And I want to say, based on our politics, we wouldn't be a fan of his approach, and neither are the union.
Okay, great.
He's definitely not making any friends anywhere. Except for, business owners and the elite.
The Richies.
Yeah. So, poor Ness, while he's experiencing professional success, if you ignore the murderer on the loose, his personal life was falling apart. In March of 1938, he and his wife told the press that they were taking a vacation to Florida. Edna Ness is on record saying that she spent a lot of evenings alone while Eliot worked. It is literally the only comment that she ever made on the record.
Oh.
The two went down to Florida, but only Eliot came back.
Oh, dear.
The couple divorced in early 1939. Edna kept her ex-husband's name, but she never spoke to him again.
Ooh.
Wow.
She returned to Chicago, became a typist, and retreated into quiet obscurity. In the mid-1970s, she moved to Miami. She took pains to hide her identity, filling her days with newspapers and television. Edna died at age 88 in November of 1994. She never remarried, left no family, and received no funeral. Quote, "She had been alone for many years," said her closest friend at the time. Her greatest wish was to not be known.
Wow.
So, by the winter of 1938, Clevelanders had reason to hope that the torso killings might be over. For the first time since 1935, the city had gone longer than 5 months without a body turning up. That changed in April of 1938. So in April 1938, pieces of a woman's body are discovered. An autopsy was done. Like the other female victims, the woman was the mother of multiple children. However, unlike the other victims, she had a large amount of morphine in her system. Officials couldn't tell if she was drugged or if she was a morphine addict. And without any arms, they couldn't look for needle marks.
God.
Ultimately, it was decided that the woman was the victim of the torso killer, as the markings on her torso were similar.
Yeah.
Oh, and then with this discovery, he ripped He ripped the head off with his hands.
No.
Yeah, he started cutting the head and then
Get out of here.
ripped the rest of it off with his hands.
What the? My. He's like turning into an animal.
He really is. This is terrifying. I can only emotionally manage this because it was in the 1930s.
Yeah, seriously.
It was almost 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes, but it is for real horrifying and disgusting and just tremendously upsetting.
God.
So at this point, the butcher had become the subject of the largest manhunt in Cleveland history. Peter Murillo and his partner Martin Zleweski were the only two detectives working on the case full time.
Okay. It's still not a big priority.
They're like, but you guys, cars, you guys.
We cared about poor people even less back then? I don't know.
Seriously.
Like Stack said in the segment, Murillo and Zleweski questioned more than 1,500 people, arresting about 300.
Whoa.
By year's end, they had spoken to over 5,000 suspects.
Oh my gosh.
The investigators, after years of fruitless searching, grew desperate, pursuing even more eccentric lines of inquiry. Because the butcher drained the victims of blood, police sought someone with a certain rare blood disease who might need illicit transfusions.
Oh boy, did we not know anything about blood.
The National Guard took aerial photos of Kingsbury Run, scrutinizing them for hidden pathways that might allow the killer to move about undetected. Some speculated that the butcher was a collection of murderers who dismembered their victims in similar ways. They're just like happening to all work at the same time.
We're like, oh, you also like decapitation? We should be friends.
Murillo would often gripe about wasting time on such useless leads, but he and Zleweski ran them all down anyway. The case ate into their weekends, evenings, and vacations. They kept returning to the most miserable parts of the city, probing the lives of wretched, desperate, neglected people. Quote, I roughly estimate that we checked approximately 7,300 suspects in connection with these crimes. And it's very doubtful whether the real torso killer was ever amongst them, said Murillo.
Gosh.
Oh my God.
Where is he?
I know. So after the latest victim, the two detectives got into a heated argument over a minor procedural matter. Zleweski requested a new assignment, and Murillo bitterly dismissed him. Another detective remarked, quote, them guys have been working so close to this thing that they are beginning to suspect each other as the torso slayer. During all of this, Ness kept pretty quiet in the press, and people eventually began to think he wasn't concerned about catching the killer. Then Ness gave this statement to the press, and he mentioned that the only victims they knew were, quote, a pervert and a prostitute, and that the killer went after people that, quote, nobody is likely to miss. So he's basically like, the people that write my paycheck don't care about these people. And we see this all of the time, right?
Yeah.
Serial killers preying on,
Yep.
I had recently watched the documentary about the Yorkshire Ripper on Netflix, and Peter Sutcliffe sort of did the same thing, but he made the mistake. He started killing middle-class white women. And suddenly...
And then people start caring.
So, these authors make the argument that had Cleveland's elite demanded an arrest the way Cleveland's elite demanded arrest with Capone in Chicago, Ness would have taken a much more active interest in the case sooner. But instead, he focused on matters that were more pressing to the civil leaders, like driving racketeers out of labor, cleaning up corruption, and those traffic accidents. But, like I said, in the eyes of the press, all the good work that Ness was doing was overshadowed by the guy decapitating people. The press was like, cool butt, like big butt. So David Cowles, the ballistic expert who had originally suspected the doctor way back in 1935, he revisited that doctor's alibi. So the doctor was apparently in a veterans hospital called Soldiers and Sailors Home. And he had said that he was checked into this hospital at the time of the murder so that there's no way that he could have, committed them. Cowles went to the hospital and realized that the doctor's alibi was completely worthless. The doctor was able to come and go as he pleased without anyone paying attention. So he could have just signed himself in and then left the hospital. Cowles also found someone who knew the doctor. It was a man named Alex Archaki. And this man, Archaki, met the doctor in a bar and basically traded alcohol for prescription drugs with the doctor. So Archaki told Cowles that the doctor would sometimes disappear for a few days, and then there would be a report of a new torso.
Oh.
The torso investigators had been watching this doctor along with hundreds of other medical professionals, but they admittedly lost track of him once or twice shortly before another torso murder.
Oh.
So the investigators referred to this suspect as Dr. X for decades. And I'll circle back to it, but this name was completely under wraps. Nobody could say it out loud. The doctor's real name was Francis Edward Sweeney. He was 44 years old. He received his medical degree in 1938, but by 1939, he was drinking so heavily that the alcohol damaged his nerve endings in his hands and feet.
Oh, my God.
Leaving him in constant pain and unable to practice.
Whoa.
God. Sweeney's drinking also fueled hallucinations. He would disappear for long stretches without explanation. In late 1933 and early 1934, his wife filed 2 petitions questioning his sanity.
Ooh.
Both times, he was committed, examined, and discharged. Sweeney shared a practice with several other physicians on Broadway Avenue, barely a mile from Kingsbury Run. He was also born in Kingsbury Run. He was the child of immigrants. Next door, a funeral parlor handled the city's indigent corpses. The undertaker apparently allowed Sweeney to indulge in, quote, frustrated desire to operate by practicing on unclaimed bodies.
Oh, my goodness.
Witnesses would describe Sweeney cutting up corpses in, quote, exactly the same way the butcher dismembered his victims.
Oh, no.
So, Sweeney may have pursued these murders in the funeral parlor itself or at an industrial facility that the undertaker owned near Jackass Hill. As a private, secluded spot suitable for the cleaning, draining, and disposing of large volume of human bodies, this facility seemed ideal.
Oh.
He had motive, means, opportunity. He had access. So Sweeney obviously fits the profile to a T. Oh, right. He was also large, super strong, familiar with human anatomy, but lacking surgical precision. He had just the right amount of strength and expertise to do the butcher's work. He'd also spent most of his life in the killer's hunting ground and had access to multiple locations where he could dismember a body and clean up afterwards.
Oh, my God.
Sweeney knew that he was a person of interest. He played games with detectives, allowing them to follow him and then disappearing. Oh. He would wave to them. He would tease them. He would send beers over to them if he was at a bar and they were following him. He just generally fucked with them every single chance he got.
Oh, my gosh.
So Cowles and his men were never able to turn up any sort of physical evidence that linked Sweeney to the crime. It was all circumstantial. Short of a confession, they could only hope to catch him in the act. But he's not stupid. He knows he's being followed. So cases have been brought against people with less circumstantial evidence. The reason why Ness didn't move forward is because, like Stack told us, the doctor was from a prominent family. But most importantly, he was related to Congressman Martin L. Sweeney, who wasn't just a congressman. He was Ness's chief political antagonist who had been attacking him for years for not finding the butcher.
Oh, my gosh.
But that's making him not arrest him?
Well, arresting his cousin, even if he wasn't close to his cousin, would still be seen as a political maneuver. So without any sort of physical evidence, not catching him in the act, not getting a confession, it's going to look like Ness is like, it was your cousin. And then Sweeney's going to be like, of course he says that. Because I'm the only one giving him a hard time, you know? I mean, it's all politics. So instead of arresting Sweeney, they give him a polygraph. Polygraphs were around back then. I didn't know that.
That is wild to me.
They were a rather recent invention and obviously were not allowed in court. They were considered unreliable, but like today, they were used to get a general read of a suspect. So in 1938, they bring Sweeney to a hotel suite. Top secret, nobody knows, just a couple of people and a couple of doctors. They bring him into this hotel suite, and they had a psychiatrist named Dr. Royal Grossman who observed him for a few days. quote, Grossman was stunned when it took 3 days for Sweeney to sober up enough to be tested.
Whoa.
Dr. Leonard Keeler administered the polygraph, and he believed that Sweeney appeared guilty through his actions and some of the things that he said. And then when they showed the results to Sweeney, he tried to explain away some of his statements, and Keeler thought that that made him sound even more guilty. So then Keeler suggested that Sweeney undergo hypnosis, and then Sweeney threw a fit, demanded a lawyer, and then never cooperated again. So, after days spent at the hotel with these various doctors and law enforcement officials, Sweeney emerged with a new addiction. He became obsessed with Eliot Ness.
Oh, spook.
So, August 16th, 1938, 3 men discover the partial remains of a woman who had been dead for 4 to 6 months. So, the other interesting thing about this is that these bodies are turning up, but we don't know. They've been around forever.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Where are they being kept before
Where
that?
are they being kept? These are like areas where it's filled with trash, but people are constantly rifling through trash. So, they're heavily populated areas.
Oh, God.
But police search the area, and the rest of the body is in 9 pieces.
Oh, my goodness.
The packages had been wrapped in butcher's paper with the thighs held together with rubber bands like cuts of meat.
I remember this.
The arms and the legs were wrapped in cardboard boxes, as was the head. Upon inspection, the coroner, Gerber, said that the portions of the body looked dry and hard, as if preserved, and that parts looked as though they had been stored in a refrigerator. So news of the discovery that afternoon spread super quickly, right? I mean, everybody's out in the open, apparently.
Yeah.
So soon there are dozens of looky-loos in the area. One of these looky-loos notices a foul smell, follows the stench to pieces of a second body, almost entirely decomposed. That victim had been dead for 7 to 12 months. This discovery brought the butcher's tally to 12 or 13, depending if you think that the first female victim, the, quote, Lady of the Lake, who was murdered in 1934, was a butcher victim or not. The coroner didn't think so. Historians think yes. And as Stack told us, the last 2 victims were placed just feet away from City Hall, where Ness had his offices. So an independent pathologist examined the female body parts and found that the body hadn't been treated or refrigerated. It had been embalmed. So the person who dumped the body wasn't necessarily guilty of murder, but may have been guilty of grave robbing. Some detectives decided that it was a prank. But Ness and Cowles knew of a certain doctor who enjoyed cutting up indigent, unclaimed bodies at a local funeral home. So, probably Sweeney. Okay, so it's at this point that Ness loses the script. Like Stack says, he decides that if he can't find the killer, he's going to remove the killer's victim pool. Less than 48 hours later, he burns Kingsbury Run to the ground.
Oh, my God.
The most messed up part of this story, and obviously there's a million aspects that are messed up, is that many people who lived in Kingsbury Run were working poor. They got up every morning. They went to work. They just couldn't get ahead. They couldn't earn enough money to get an apartment. They couldn't get out. But they were not all alcoholics. They were not all drug users. Not that those people deserve to be decapitated. No. But these people were working poor. Most of them had a job that they went to every day. So Ness emptied the tents and shacks of all the residents and then arrested all of them. The police went into each one of the tents or shacks and cataloged the possessions so that they would be returned to the owners. And then the firemen came in and burned it down. The last of the shantytowns was burned on September 9th, 1938. In just over 3 weeks, police had destroyed almost 100 shacks and displaced hundreds of people.
God.
Meanwhile, in 1939, Eliot Ness is living, like, sort of his best life. I mean, he's enjoying this really high-profile life. He's now divorced. He was out dancing and socializing every night. He's at nightclubs. Ladies love him. He's, like, really cute. He's very charming. And his friends say that he was out with a new girl every night. He hung out with the city's wealthy and elite. Most loved him, but some found him off-putting. Ness had a habit of playing really weird pranks. One night he threw a party and then late in the evening informed the guests that he had bugged the apartment and that everything that they had said had been recorded.
No!
Another time he was out at a nightclub and he's sitting with his friend and this like mafia guy comes in and pulls out a gun to shoot him. And it turns out that Ness had hired an actor.
Okay.
Most WTF is he once got to a party at a friend's house early and hid a fake leg under a sofa. And then once the party was in full swing, he pulled out the leg and made a joke about the butcher's latest victim.
That's not funny.
No, not at all.
God.
So women loved him, but some people were like, something's not right there.
God.
So in mid-October 1939, Ness remarried. His new wife was a commercial artist. Her name was Eveline McAndrew. And unlike the former Mrs. Ness, Eveline enjoyed the spotlight. So they threw these wild parties with the elite. Although Ness wasn't as wealthy as the people that he spent time with, his job afforded perks, which is really interesting because Ness fought corruption and bribery, but he thought it was okay to live rent-free in his like rich businessman friend's house. So, I don't know. It's like a little strange, but he accepted lots of gifts and he loved to spend money. And I think he kind of got that from being around these mafia types when he was younger. So he would like surprise Eveline with a new car, like randomly bring home a new car. He carried like wads of cash. Eveline and Eliot, like I said, through these parties, they drank a ton. They were total booze hounds. People were like, it was fine. And then other people were like, it was not fine. Apparently, Eveline was sort of a Jekyll and Hyde. She was a really fun person, but when she drank, she got really mean. She also liked attention. Friends tell of her flirting, and she had this big party and then went skinny dipping in the middle of it. So, as far as the butcher, Ness is convinced that it's Sweeney. You know, Sweeney was sending notes to Ness, sending notes to police officers. He's like he would get drunk and he would make phone calls to Ness and tell him things that only the murderer would know.
Okay.
Also, not surprisingly, or I don't know how much Congressman Martin Sweeney knew about his cousin's activities because they weren't close. But Ness was kind of stuck because he didn't have enough evidence to come after Dr. Sweeney, but he wanted him off the streets. So it's theorized that he went to the congressman and basically was like, dude, it's your cousin. Here's all of the evidence. I don't have enough evidence to put him in jail, but you need to do something. If you do something, I won't tell anybody. Apparently, Ness was told that the congressman was going to have Dr. Sweeney committed out of state. So as far as Ness is concerned, the case is closed. In October of 1942, after 6 years on the case, Detective Murillo was reassigned. Although Ness believed he had solved the case, he could never calm the city's fears. So anytime somebody was murdered in a horrendous way, everyone in Cleveland thought that it was the torso murder. And most interestingly, Ness was so true to his word to the congressman that he swore everyone on his team to secrecy, so much so that decades went by before anyone revealed the suspect's name.
Wow.
He was called Dr. X up until the 1960s.
Wow.
Nobody knew who he was. In 1950, a torso was discovered with all of the earmarks of the torso killer. It turned out that Dr. Sweeney had only been committed for less than a year to that out-of-state psychiatric facility, and then he went back to the care of the Soldiers and Sailors Home, where he came and went as he pleased.
Oh my God.
Law enforcement would never admit that it was the butcher, but we now know that as serial killers age, some kill less frequently. So it's entirely possible that it was Dr. Sweeney. Witnesses describe a large, heavyset, middle-aged man who frequented the spot where the victim was dumped, and the description matched Sweeney. At this point, Sweeney is in a permanent state of psychosis. Along with crippling alcoholism, he has also developed a healthy addiction to barbiturates. He would stay at Soldiers and Sailors Home off and on. He wrote to Ness for about 2 years, from 1954 to 1956, writing Ness bizarre postcards with cutout images and rambling writings. And then people assumed that the person had died that was writing the notes, but it turned out that Sweeney was moved to more intensive psychiatric care in 1956, which is probably why the notes stopped. They probably wouldn't let him write. The probable mad butcher spent the last years in hospitals, dying at age 70 in 1964. I'm going to wrap this up shortly. And Ness was essentially pushed out of Cleveland. It didn't really have much to do with the Butcher. It had to do with politics, union representatives, just a lot of like white noise that is not Butcher related, so we're not going to talk about it. He eventually divorced Eveline when she left him for another woman that she had fallen in love with. He remarried for a third time to a woman named Elizabeth, and they adopted a son named Robert. He did run for mayor, but like the segment says, he crashed and burned. He basically had no skill at public speaking, and he kept making remarks about how he was running for office because it was something to do. Like, he was basically really rich at the time, and he was like, I don't know, let me try this.
Cool.
He and Elizabeth, she went by Betty, he and Betty came across as rich, entitled, and generally clueless about the people in Cleveland, so he didn't win. Eventually, the Nesses would settle in a small town in Pennsylvania called Coudersport, where nobody knew who he was. So he would tell stories sometimes, and people would think that he was lying.
Oh, my God.
He developed an addiction to alcohol and made some bad business choices, and the family became completely impoverished. Eventually, Ness would meet Oscar Fraley, the author featured in the segment, and he would write Ness's book called The Untouchables. In early May of 1957, Ness found out that The Untouchables was going to be made into a TV show. Warner Brothers had bought the film rights for $25,000 before the book was even released. He and Fraley would split the payout, and Ness was thrilled and hoped that the money would be enough to get out of debt and that his family would have better days ahead. Thursday, May 16th, 1957, it was a very hot day in Coudersport, Pennsylvania. Eliot Ness went for a walk through town. He spoke to some acquaintances and picked up a bottle of Martini Rossi gin and a prescription from the local drugstore. He walked home, and his wife Betty was working in the garden. She heard the water running in the kitchen sink, and then she heard a glass shatter. She called to Eliot, but he didn't respond. She went into the house and found him dead on the kitchen floor. Eliot Ness had died of a heart attack at just 54 years old.
Damn.
The man, the myth, the legendary Eliot Ness died $9,000 in debt without enough money in his bank account to even cover a funeral. 4 days after his death, Ness was given a funeral in Cleveland. In Chicago, the 4 major papers ran his obituary, and the AP picked up the story. Once the story hit, telegrams began pouring into Coudersport from all over the country. So it's government officials, prominent businessmen, Hollywood stars were all expressing their condolences. And then the people in Coudersport were like, oh, he really was Eliot Ness.
Well, we just thought he was that crazy guy.
Yeah, we thought he was a crazy alcoholic liar.
Yeah.
On September 23rd, 1957, the book The Untouchables was released. Critics gave it good reviews, and some magazines serialized it, but it never made it to the bestseller list. In the words of Betty Ness, quote, Eliot's last attempt to provide for his family had produced a resounding flop. And then finally, we can't wrap this up without talking a little bit about the TV show The Untouchables. It is one of the roles that our true honey Robert Stack is most famous for. In 1958, Desilu Productions bought The Untouchables for $2,500. The script had fallen into development hell, and even though he was heavily in debt, Desi Arnaz was determined to make the movie. Lucille Ball was stumped as to why Arnaz was so hot on making this, and then he revealed to her that he wanted to play Eliot Ness.
Oh, my gosh.
In true Lucille Ball form, she shut him the fuck down, reminding him of his thick Cuban accent. Arnaz reluctantly relented, but developed The Untouchables as a 2-part episode of the Westinghouse Desilu Playhouse, a new anthology series on CBS. Robert Stack was a last-minute replacement after 2 other actors turned down the part of Ness. Stack says, quote, Eliot Ness was a complete stranger to me. The cold-eyed authoritarian was the biggest stretch I was ever asked to perform. The first Playhouse installment aired on April 20th, 1959. That would have been Ness's 56th birthday. Betty Ness said that Robert Stack had the same quietness of voice and gentle quality that characterized Eliot. The Playhouse episodes were a hit, and it was picked up as a series. And although Stack said that he didn't want to do television, Arnaz realized that he was part of the draw. So he offered Stack 25% stake of the series, and Stack signed on. The first 2 seasons had high ratings and scored Stack that Emmy. And then Stack promoted the series by appearing on an episode of This Is Your Life with Betty Ness. After the TV show, the book The Untouchables became a bestseller. The publisher put out a new edition, removing the photo of the real Eliot Ness on the cover so that readers could picture Robert Stack instead.
Oh my gosh.
Betty earned fewer than $200 from each new episode of The Untouchables and just $28 per rerun. Hardly any of the book's proceeds found their way to Betty. After the TV series ended, she moved in with her former housekeeper, Corinne Lawson. She was drinking heavily and depressed. Eliot Ness's son, Robert, died in August of 1976 of leukemia. He was just 30 years old. And Betty succumbed to cancer the following year at 71, surviving her husband by 20 years.
Ooh. Whoa.
You did it, girl.
Honey, you did it.
Honey. Eliza here to tell you about Organifi. Organifi is a line of organic superfood blends that offer plant-based nutrition with high-quality ingredients and less than 3 grams of sugar. Each superfood blend is easy to use by simply mixing it with water or your favorite beverage, providing you with quality nutrition throughout your day. It costs less than $3 per day, and Organifi takes pride and care in offering the best-tasting superfood products on the market. There are many options to choose from, but I have especially been enjoying Organifi Gold, which is a super delicious tea that contains powerful superfoods and mushrooms to help you relax so you can wake up feeling refreshed and energized. It supports rest and relaxation, a healthy immune response, and a healthy response to stress, and who doesn't need that right now? It's also healthy enough to drink every day or even twice a day, and contains turmeric and ginger. So you can go to Organifi.com/mysteries and use code mysteries to get 15% off all orders. Organifi.com/mysteries. That's Organifi.com/mysteries and use code mysteries to get 15% off all orders. Okay, y'all ready?
Ready.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you a tale, and it's really sad. It's really, really, really sad.
Can't wait.
I can't wait. I can't wait to work harder emotionally.
I mean, I'm just saying, it is so sad. I don't know if you heard me the first 2 times.
That is definitely what you're saying. I hear you loud and clear.
We hear you. The listeners hear you. We're going to
I
cry.
especially have to tell Carlin because she didn't watch my segment. So she
Don't
needs to know
out
how
me.
sad it is.
I was purposely not saying it to them.
I know.
It's the first time I've ever done that, you guys. I would never.
No, she would never. Also, it's going to be interesting, and it will eventually get obvious that you haven't seen it. So it's
okay.
Okay. So on July 9th, 1989, in St. Louis, Missouri, a young mother rushed her critically ill baby to the hospital. The mother's name was Patricia or Patty Stallings. The baby was 3-month-old Ryan Stallings. Since birth, Ryan had suffered from chronic gastric distress. Mm-hmm. On the day Ryan was brought to the emergency room, his breathing had become labored and he was vomiting uncontrollably. Mm. According to his father, David, Ryan was immediately placed in the pediatric intensive care unit. And David says, quote, oh my gosh, David is such a sweetie. So he says, quote, it was just a shock to see a little boy incapacitated the way he was. It was to the point where they said, well, they don't know how long he's going to be here. We don't know what's wrong with him yet, so you may as well just go to the waiting room and stay out there until we can tell you what's wrong. Which, this is also in the 80s, so they're not having the parents in the room with the kid.
No.
And then it says David and Patty Stallings rented a hospital room to be near their son.
Wow. So they didn't even have like a pediatric unit area for the parents to sleep or stay if they couldn't be with their kid?
I guess not, unless it was another room that they had open. After 3 agonizing days, the Stallings learned that Ryan would recover. The diagnosis, however, was completely shocking. And this is a reenactment. One of the doctors comes in and tells them the news that it appears that Ryan has been poisoned. So, of course, the parents are immediately suspects. And the doctor tells them there is acetone in your child's blood, and this is in things like nail polish remover. So that's the only thing that doctor in the reenactment mentions, acetone. But there is another substance in his blood as well, which we will talk about in a bit. But it's a substance that can be found in antifreeze. And so he also says, do you have antifreeze around the house? And the dad's like, yes, like I do. I have it in the basement. And the doctor says, well, is there any way that he could have gotten into it? And the dad's like, no. So right away, doctors are really suspicious, and Patty Stallings says they were very polite, but they would not allow us to see Ryan alone. There would have to be 2 nurses or a doctor present. We were never allowed at his bedside alone. That bothered me, but I still didn't understand because I wasn't looking at it the way they were, I guess. That same day, the police were brought in to investigate. According to Patty, detectives interviewed her husband in a separate room. She says, we were split up and talked to by detectives. They immediately started asking me, is there a problem at home? Are you and David fighting? They were saying that they knew that the baby had been poisoned by either me or my husband. It infuriated me, and I was just devastated. I was blown away. Ryan was my world. He was perfect. So Ryan's condition did improve. After 12 days, he was released from the hospital, but not to the custody of Patty and David. Patty and David's contact with Ryan was severely restricted. According to Patty, they were allowed only a 1-hour visit each week on Thursdays. She said, I just could not wait till Thursday. I would tell everybody over and over and over how last Thursday went. That was my life. So this continues for 5 weeks, where they just have these once-a-week visits with their baby who they had up till then spent all their time with.
Oh, my God.
And then during the 6th visit, Patty was apparently left alone with Ryan for, this is the narrative says, Patty was left alone with Ryan for a short time. Then, 3 days later, Ryan suffered another severe attack of vomiting. Once again, he was rushed to the hospital, and once again, the diagnosis was poisoning. Authorities then came to Patty's house with an arrest warrant.
Wait, I have a question about that, though.
Yeah.
3 days later seems like a really long time for... Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no. That's... Yeah, exactly.
Is that...
3 days later is a long time for a poisoning to take effect. Yeah, definitely. So Patty Stallings was arrested and charged with assault. While Patty was alone in jail, her son was dying. So Ryan was placed on life support systems in the hospital, and David Stallings found himself trapped in a private hell. He said, the doctors come up and tell me that they have a feeling that Ryan's not going to make it and that maybe I should contact a minister and have him baptized. I tried to get Patty up there, and all I got from the judge was, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to let a baby killer up there. And I said, this lady did not kill this baby. When they finally came back to me and told me that, quote, we need to know if we can turn him off, I told them, go ahead and shut the machine down. But I wanted to be in there with him. And he's crying when he's saying this.
Oh, it's so sad. It's so sad. Upsetting. It's so sad.
Oh, no. I don't know if I can watch it.
He says, so for 3 hours, I sat there with him in my arms, knowing that Patty couldn't be there, watching this meter on the machine go down each time his heart would beat. So on September 7th, 1989, Ryan Stallings died. He was not yet 6 months old. His mother, Patty, was now charged with first-degree murder instead of just assault, and held without bail. She was not allowed to attend Ryan's funeral.
Oh, my God.
So, oh my gosh, it is, and I mean, it's terrible if you think that she poisoned him. It's just like, then she's a monster. But knowing what we know, so... Okay.
Yeah, but as an original viewer, you're probably like, well,
oh my gosh.
she shouldn't be there. She's a monster. She murdered her son.
Exactly. So a few weeks later, Patty discovered she was pregnant again while she was in jail.
Oh my gosh.
6 months later, David Stallings Jr. was born at a hospital near the prison on February 17th, 1990. Even though his father, David Sr., was not a suspect, he was not allowed to take his son home.
What?
So he couldn't even take the second baby home when Patricia's still in jail, and They did not think David had anything to do with it.
How can they do that?
They can do whatever they want.
So the baby was placed in foster care. Ironically, this devastating blow to the family of the baby being taken away from them would turn out to be a stroke of good luck. And Stack says without it, Patty and David Stallings might have been accused of poisoning their second son as well. So, when David Stallings Jr. was 2 weeks old in foster care, he began to exhibit symptoms identical to the ones that had plagued his brother Ryan. But this time, the diagnosis was different. David Jr. had a rare genetic disorder, MMA.
Oh.
I know. In which the body produces chemical byproducts that are similar to the chemicals found in antifreeze.
Oh my God.
Unsolved Mysteries contacted an independent medical expert about MMA. And they said it would be very simple to confuse the diagnosis of MMA with multiple poisonings because the symptoms are very similar. But more importantly than that, MMA and other similar disorders are very rare, and the majority of doctors either will never have seen a case, or if they have seen a case, didn't know that they saw it and actually confused it for something else.
Oh my God.
Like a parent poisoning their child.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, there is like so much more too. Okay. So, while prosecutors evaluated the medical evidence, Patty Stallings was released from jail. However, she was still denied visitation rights with her newborn son. She said, "I thought it was over as far as the nightmare of being accused of hurting Ryan. I was positive because even my lawyer said it was over. There was no way they could not see the truth right in front of their eyes." Yet, local officials continued to pursue Ryan's case. Their position was that Ryan Stallings had not died from MMA. In the judge's chambers, they cited 4 expert witnesses. The judge refused to allow the diagnosis of David Jr., the brother, to be presented to the jury. So the jury in her trial did not get to hear
Why?
that the brother had been diagnosed with
They
MMA.
are of the same DNA. Like,
Well, but they had committed all of this time and energy to a conviction.
oh my God, that is fucked up.
George McElroy, who's one of the prosecuting attorneys, we're going to hear about him a few times. He says, "We were concerned that if it came out that David Jr., or Ryan for that matter, had this methylmalonic acidosis," that's what MMA stands for, "unless it could be shown that he actually died of that or it was some kind of a contributing factor to his death, we believe that would not be relevant and in fact might cause the jury to go off on a wild goose chase and make a decision based on something that's really not relevant."
Oh, like science?
So without that medical testimony, the case against Patty seemed airtight from the prosecution's point of view.
Which doesn't make it okay. Like,
know.
How can you be a prosecutor?
Right, and think, oh, I get to leave this out. Now it's airtight.
If you have to leave something out for it to be airtight, it's not airtight.
Yeah.
Right. So the prosecution especially focused in the trial on the events of Thursday, August 31st, 1989, which was the day of that 6th parental visit with Ryan.
Uh-huh.
So then UM goes a little deeper on that day. And on that day, David's parents were invited to visit also. And David says, about 20 minutes into the visit, my mom and dad decided to leave. Patty and I had the rest of the time with him. I escorted my mom and dad out and walked down to the hall. I was out of the room no more than 45 seconds at the most. But according to George McElroy, Patty was alone with David anywhere from 3 minutes to 8 minutes. He says, during that time, she did actually feed the child a bottle. The child, again, got the same symptoms it had before. It leaves out the part that it was 3 days later.
Oh my God.
Came back into the hospital, was diagnosed with, this is the other thing besides acetone that was in his blood, ethylene glycol poisoning. But the state believes, and certainly circumstantial evidence suggests, that she slipped ethylene glycol or antifreeze into the bottle during that feeding. But David Stallings says that's incorrect. What happened was I walked back to the cubbyhole where Patty was with Ryan. He started getting cranky, so I reached into the bag, took the bottle out, and started feeding him. I saw the bottle. I did not see any discoloration in the bottle whatsoever. There was nothing done to that bottle, absolutely nothing. Because antifreeze is bright green.
Green. For a reason, right?
Yeah.
It's bright green so that you can recognize it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, so even though poor Patty Stallings has this newborn son who's gravely ill, and she believes her other son died of this disease, that now she can't even see her newborn son, she's like, this has to be proof to get me out of here. On March 4th, 1991, the jury sided with the prosecution, and Patty Stallings was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Oh my God.
Each visit with her son was limited to 1 hour. David Stallings Sr. was allowed to see his son once a week, so even he is still not allowed to have custody of his son. He says, I cannot see how they can live with themselves knowing that they sent an innocent woman to jail for the rest of her life for something she didn't do. If Ryan would have been correctly diagnosed with MMA, none of this would have happened. None of these series of events in the last 2 years would have happened. It all depended on whether he was correctly diagnosed, which he was not. So, the segment does give us an update, but I'm going to save that for a bit and go into the Forensic Files episode I watched on the case.
Oh, you got to watch an FF. I love that.
So this episode aired in 1998, and of course, you know, Forensic Files got to have that clever name. It was called Deadly Formula.
Oh my God.
Oh, God. Cringe.
So salacious.
Cringe.
Yeah. So they give some different information that I wanted to point out. The reenactment in Forensic Files starts with baby Ryan being very sick and the woman playing Patty rushing him to the hospital. But the episode says that she had wanted to take him to St. Louis Children's Hospital, but got lost and went to Cardinal Glennon Children's Hospital instead. This will be important later.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So the Forensic Files episode also says that Patricia Stallings also had a 5-year-old son, quote, born out of wedlock, who was in her sister's custody because of allegations of child abuse.
Oh, no.
Fuck.
Now, Patty explains this as she had no money and nowhere to live, so basically they were houseless. And when found, her son had frostbite and was malnourished, but they were homeless.
Oh my God.
So her sister let it get that bad before she took custody?
Yeah. Oh, I know. And I can't find anything on the sister. I can't find the older son.
What the hell?
My God.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. I wonder if the jury knew about that.
Yeah.
too.
I'm sure they did. And I mean, I would probably think that too if I knew that part.
Of course.
Yeah. So as we know, when DJ, that's the nickname for baby David, DJ showed the same symptoms that Ryan had, he was rushed to the hospital. The hospital he was taken to by his foster parents was St. Louis Children's Hospital, where Patricia had wanted to take Ryan. They quickly were able to diagnose him with the very rare metabolic disorder, methylmalonic acidemia, or MMA.
Oh my God.
Quickly?
Yes. So it is an inherited condition because of a faulty gene. Children with MMA lack a protein that the body needs to break down the fats and cholesterol inside cells. As a result, these substances build up in cells, causing damage to the brain, liver, kidneys, and other organs that gets worse over time. It also produces toxins in the blood. And like both parents have to have it or carry the gene for it for your child to get it. So the chance, it's rare, but the chances that one of your children have it is likely that another one will too. Because you both are the perfect meshing to create this.
Yeah.
So, like we said, during the trial, everyone still agreed and testified that Ryan had to have died of ethylene glycol poisoning, which the segment didn't explain super well about why they would agree with that. Like, they didn't go in. I mean, it makes sense, I guess, if they left out the part about DJ having MMA, but they just, I don't know, presented it in a way that was, like, very airtight. And I don't think that she received great counsel, maybe, from her first lawyer. It doesn't seem like.
Doesn't seem like she had a lot of money if her first child was taken away.
Right. So when the Stallings case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries, biochemist William Sly of St. Louis University saw the episode. He agreed to test Ryan's blood and gave it to Dr. James Shoemaker, who's director of the metabolic screening lab at St. Louis University. Dr. Shoemaker immediately confirmed that Ryan had MMA. However, ethylene glycol is not a human metabolite, even in cases of MMA, and Patricia Stallings went to trial with no explanation linking MMA to ethylene glycol.
Oh, that's important.
Yeah, so they did not describe to the jury how it would even be possible to confuse the two, to confuse ethylene glycol poisoning with MMA.
Wow.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, it makes sense. If it was presented without all that information,
Yeah.
like you said, Carlin, then yeah.
I'm not blaming the jury at all.
No.
Yeah,
Clearly-
she received poor counsel, and the prosecution also did not
Receive all the information.
or look into everything.
They ignored pertinent information. She
Yeah.
was failed by the law, but not the jury at all.
No.
Yeah. So Dr. Shoemaker asked the prosecutor, George McElroy, for the methods that had been used to measure ethylene glycol in Ryan's blood, and McElroy supplied that information. When the method was used on blood from Ryan and DJ, it was seen that propionic acid, which is produced in MMA patients, caused a result that careless observers might mistake for ethylene glycol. And they, of course, like they show all this in forensic files. I'm just going to keep reading what I wrote so that I don't mess any of the sciencey stuff up, and then I can try and explain it more.
Okay.
So Dr. Shoemaker then sent samples of propionate-spiked blood to several laboratories who tested it with the same methods used in the Stallings case. Some of the laboratories came to the incorrect conclusion that the blood reflected ethylene glycol poisoning. So he's like sending this knowing it's propionate.
Yeah.
And the labs still messed it up.
Oh my gosh.
And this is because of Unsolved Mysteries
Yeah.
that these doctors even took this case on. At Sly's and Shoemaker's request, Piero Rinaldo, who we do see in the update in this segment, of Yale University, also looked at the case as like a totally third-party person and concluded that Ryan had, in fact, died of MMA. So his testimony helped to convince McElroy that Ryan might not have been poisoned after her conviction. So basically, the labs said that based on retention times, which is this method of testing, and you get these graphs that will come out and they've got peaks, and they might look similar shaped peaks for like ethylene glycol and propionate, but Dr. Shoemaker shows like if you actually overlay them and line them up the exact same way as they should be, they're very different. Like someone should not have made this mistake. Yes, you can look at them side by side and think, oh, these are the exact same shape, but they're not. Propionic acid is often found in the blood of those with MMA. The only difference between the two substances are a few carbon atoms. So they are quite similar, but that's dangerous when you're dealing with someone's life and her family's life.
Yeah.
So the Stallings, with this information, hired a new lawyer to handle their appeal. He immediately asked for a new trial, and even the prosecution agreed. So the third-party doctor from Yale, like I said, looked over the lab results, and he even called the original ones garbage.
Wow.
Sounds like the way we would talk about a result.
I know, I love it.
It's garbage.
But if DJ little brother had not been born,
my
Patricia
God.
Stallings
Oh,
would
forget it.
absolutely still be in prison.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh my God.
And then we hear on Forensic Files, I've got pictures of George McElroy, the prosecutor from UM, and Forensic Files years later, that will show. But he says, I can understand a person that's been through all that she went through, finding an apology pretty lack. But as I told her, I had a job to do. I had the evidence before me, which gave me no choice.
Okay. McElroy, that's not an apology.
No, it's just not. Just because you say it's not enough.
Yeah. An apology is...
do it.
is begging someone to forgive you for the mistake that you sort of consciously made by ignoring the other evidence and testimony.
Yeah.
This is horrible.
People make mistakes, especially with something like this. A couple atoms being off, of course. But then to give a half-hearted, I'm sorry that you're upset apology is so cruel.
Yeah.
And on the
not
UM
okay.
update, they do show the press conference where he announces, she's free and we made a mistake. And he does say, I'm sorry, but he's having to do that. He's in front of the cameras. Then when he's on Forensic Files by himself, he says, I
had
can
a job to
understand.
do?
Yeah, just ridiculous.
Also, your job is the law. It's not to prosecute someone.
Yeah.
Maybe
And-
rediscover what your purpose truly is. It's
Yeah.
the law.
Right.
It's not to win. It's the law.
Totally.
Well, don't worry. Patricia gets back at him.
Good. I hope she sues them for $1 gajillion.
Me too, and that's still not enough.
I know.
So it doesn't say if she sued the state, but she did sue the hospitals, doctors, and labs, or just the one hospital, doctors and labs that had misdiagnosed Ryan, and all were settled before they went to court. So you can't see how much money she got, but hopefully she got a lot.
Yeah.
In July 1991, Stallings was released from jail, and then in September, prosecutors apologized and dropped the case against her. So she did not have to have another trial. They just dropped it. Patricia said she later thought that the perception of her case may have been influenced by the case of Paula Sims, who was a mother that had killed her children, and that case unfolded around the same time.
That name sounds familiar.
I don't know Paula Sims.
And there was it was really popular, and there was a lot of public outcry. So I looked her up, and I don't know if I want to dive into.
Can you just tell me
this.
about it? Because otherwise I'm going to look it up as soon
I
as
know.
we're done talking.
Yes. So she claimed that a masked gunman had kidnapped her daughter.
I don't know this case.
Her daughter Lorelai, who was 13 days old, and her daughter Heather.
13 days?
Wait, that can't be right. This is from Murderpedia. Victims: her daughter Lorelai, 13 days old. Her daughter Heather, 6 weeks old.
Maybe they meant
Do you
13
think that
months.
she did it, or maybe
Twice?
she did it twice? Oh my God, she did it twice. June 17th, 1986.
Just
April
like they
29th,
thought Patricia
1989.
Stallings did.
Yes, and in both cases, it was suffocation caused most likely by placing a hand across the mouth.
But SIDS, they thought it was SIDS.
Well, but then what's this thing about her saying a masked gunman had kidnapped the daughter? Did she hide the body? Okay, we have to look up this case.
Holy shit. I've never heard of this case.
So here's where Patty Stallings gets back at McElroy. So in 1994, McElroy ran for re-election as Jefferson County prosecutor, and Stallings donated $10,000 to his opponent.
That's how you do it. That's how you do it.
Robert Wilkins, and Wilkins won the race.
Oh, good.
Then McElroy, the old prosecutor, offered to show Wilkins, the new one, the information he had on Stallings. And somehow Stallings found out about that, and she's like, I don't want all these laying around with all of this stuff still in here when I have been exonerated. Some of the information was ordered to be expunged, but a judge said that Missouri law mandated that prosecutors confidentially maintain some of the information related to felony arrests. So that's it. Unfortunately, their son, DJ, died in 2013 at the age of 23.
No.
And I could not find anything about what it was from.
23.
I know. I mean, I don't want to say, but he was ill, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was MMA, but it could have been something else because it is manageable by diet. And if you know you have it, you can try to help treat it. Mm-hmm. But often newborns and babies die from this thing and no one even knew they had it, so they couldn't try to help in the first place. And then as far as I can tell, Patricia Stallings is still alive, but David Stallings, the father, died after a long illness in 2019. I also read that the two had gotten divorced, which is they have been through so much trauma.
Yeah.
But it looked like David from what I could find, had a lot of family members that loved him and maybe had gotten remarried. I'm not totally sure, but it is so sad. And also, little DJ is a miracle. It must have been so weird to be him because thank goodness he was born. Thank goodness he had this disease, which is terrible for him. But if he didn't have it, he would have grown up without his mother.
Yeah, with no mother.
It's just what a crazy
and
life he
was
had.
integral in solving this or helping solve this.
Yes.
Ooh,
Wow.
yeah.
So
Oh my
that's it.
gosh. What a wild one.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
It's so sad. Ugh.
All right, guys. So we're going to finish up episode 19 next week with the stories of the unexplained death of, who is it, Carlin?
It's the unexplained death of Michael Franke.
And then I'm going to wrap it up with a missing segment about Oded Gordon. Go to patreon.com/Resolved Mysteries Podcast if you're interested in supporting us there. If you subscribe at the $5 a month level or higher, you're going to get ad-free episodes, 2 extra episodes a month, and other goodies. To see photos we reference in the episode, follow us on Instagram at Resolved Mysteries Podcast or on Facebook and Twitter at Resolve the Pod. You can contact us at resolvedmysteriespodcast.com, resolvedmysteriespodcast@gmail.com, or at our P.O. Box 14005, Portland, Oregon 97293.
Woo!
We love you guys.
Love ya.
Bye.
Finish that. I started watching that and I forgot about it.
It's really good, but they left out the whole part that when they arrested him, he had that sweater like on his junk.
On like a sleeve?
Yeah, so like he wore like a turtleneck sweater as underwear. So like his legs would go through the arms of the sweater and then his like dick would be in the hole of the sweater.
No.
And when they arrested him, he had it on, and they were all like, what the fuck is this? And I think it's like pretty crazy, and they left it out of the documentary. Oh, Eliza left.
She's like, I've had enough.
Eliza's like, I've had truly and well enough of this shit. Oh, God.
Honey.
Hello. Are you in the dark?
You are just a floating head.
Did you put on a black sweater?
Is this for the theme of the segment?
Surprise.
Did you put on your dick sweater?
This
Okay,
is my
anyway.
dick hanging
It's got a
out.
foreskin.
These are my legs.
It's a foreskin. Oh, fuck. Okay. All right, we got to stay on topic. I could talk about that dick sweater all night.
I can't believe
Okay.
I got cut off of dick sweater. Now I'll
so
never
good.
know.
I told you already.
You two can know if you watch the documentary.
He was wearing a sweater, like short, like underwear, with his dick.
But it was a sweater made for top.
Oh, it was
body
a
top.
sweater made for sweater wearing. 100%.
Oh.
Oh, so fucking creepy. So creepy.
Okay.
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 So where we were talking about how nobody cares if people murder impoverished people.
Yes.